Karibu sana, Madam Mwende, most welcome. Have a seat. Good. Thank you. Members, our nominee, our guest is before the committee, Madam Mwende Mwinzi, the nominee to Seoul, South Korea. So relax. We want to tell you this is your committee, Committee of Defense and Foreign Relations, the National Assembly, that is undertaking this vetting exercise on behalf of the National Assembly. But as our nominee or our guest relax and take or settle down.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honorable Vice Chair, distinguished members of the committee, members of the press, and all Kenyans watching. I'm truly honored to be here before you today as His Excellency the President's nominee, as Kenya's ambassador to the Republic of Korea. I'm grateful to the President for the faith and the confidence that he's placed in me, and I wish to thank the entire fraternity of the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, under Secretary Monica Juma, for its support. Mr. Chairman, I'm humbled by the prospect of serving our country as an envoy, particularly in this important time at our relationship with South Korea. It's my hope that pursuant our interaction, you will be able to put your trust in me as well. Indeed, as I see it, my nomination represents the value that this administration places in patriotism, strength of character, gender, and ethnic diversity. By introduction, Mr. Chairman, as you know, my name is Mwende Mwinzi. I was born to Mary and Maluki Mwinzi, and I come from a place called Kamba in Mwingi West. Kitui constituency, Mwingi West constituency in Kitui. I was actually raised in Kitui. My parents were public servants, they were teachers, who devoted their entire lives towards educating children across various institutions. Some include Kitui High School, Kimangao Girls Secondary School, and Molango Girls Secondary, where my mother was a headmistress for several years. I grew up like every other Kenyan. I grew up watching my parents struggle with raising their children while balancing to pay school fees for children who could not afford them. It was them that influenced me into servant leadership and embedded in me the virtues of honesty, humility, hard work, and more importantly, the desire to be part of the change I wish to see. I believe, Mr. Chairman, in walking the talk. I believe in bridging the gaps that I see in society. And it's as a result of plugging one of such gaps that I was rewarded by former Vice President, His Excellency Mwai Kibaki, in 2008, the Moran of the Burning Spear Award, which was conferred to me as a result of taking care of children in vulnerable communities. Mr. Chairman, I am actually the face of Kenya in all its shades and hues. After a small stint at Loreto Primary, I attended Central Primary School in Kitui. I did my O-levels at Kenya High School, my A-levels at Kieni Girls in Runyenjes in Embu, and then I went to the U.S. to pursue higher learning. I've got a Bachelor's of Science in Business Administration, and I'm currently working on a Master's of Arts in Global Security, which is slated to conclude this December. I'm sure that you'll agree with the timed application of this knowledge, given my proposed role in government. I'm sure it's also not lost on you, a committee that deals with defense matters, that security concerns are a blight on our prosperity and indeed our potential as a nation and a regional leader. I'm also sure that you're aware of the recent advancements that Korea has made with regards to technology and the manufacturing of defense equipment, and of course of our interests in deepening our cooperation between the Ministry of Defense and the Korean Acquisition Program Administration. If confirmed, and as part of my mandate to promote, protect, and pursue matters of importance to Kenya, it will be my goal to encourage and to facilitate this cooperation. Mr. Chairman, I think at this point it's important for me to mention that if confirmed as ambassador, I will not be playing a role in nation building or in the advancement of our protection for the first time. Between the years 2004 and 2007, I was privileged to be a member of the Kenya National Economic and Social Council. This body devised policy recommendations for the cabinet around social equity, economic growth, wealth, and the creation of employment. The body was also responsible for the creation of Vision 2030, the development blueprint that currently informs our big Agenda 4. Over the course of 4 years, starting 2009, I was also part of a team that was tasked to improve Kenya's perception in the U.S. while equally securing support for the country in required areas. I was the Kenyan component in this arrangement, and my portfolio and mandate, Mr. Chairman, were very clear: to protect Kenya and ensure that her interests featured prominently in each and every activity implemented. As relates to this, my team and I actioned advocacy programs that promoted our political reforms to relevant fora. We also engaged media on pertinent issues regarding socio-economics, and on a government relations front, we pursued very sensitive agendas that even touched on security matters, such as the then emanating threat of Al-Shabaab. Our position was submitted to the U.S. administration, as well as to key U.S. congressional committees, such as the Senate Relations Committee, via several high-level delegations from this country. The issue, we all agree, that being the Al-Shabaab menace, remains a pertinent one, and the action required on it as pressing then as it is now. With this as my background, Mr. Chair and members, I wish to reassure that if I'm confirmed, I will prosecute our national agenda by penetrating every single gap that is offered to me to address the challenges, bridge the shortcomings in the Dig For agenda, and in acknowledgement of the foundation set by my predecessors, build on the progress already made. My proposed station, Korea, already supports our pursuits in manufacturing, food security and nutrition, affordable housing, and universal health coverage. So it will be my task to deepen our cooperation in these areas, particularly in trade and ICT, which we all know is Korea's strength and an unexploited opportunity for Kenya. Mr. Chairman, in order to enable our interaction, and I know I've spoken for quite a while, I'd like to respectfully conclude my introduction by thanking you for this honor to appear before you in the committee, for listening to my articulation of my love of country, one instilled in me by my late father, and to also take a minute to appreciate my husband and sons for their unwavering support of me on this and all my journeys. God bless Kenya, and I welcome your questions.
You have indicated here that you are dual citizen.
Yes.
The President of Kenya has nominated you to be ambassador to Seoul if approved by this committee and the House. This is a national responsibility where your loyalty is required utmostly. Where will your loyalty be? Is it to Kenya or to the United States? Number two, to have dual citizenship and being an ambassador, you will be viewed by the world to be a spy. Could it be the case that you have vied for a representative position in Kenya? And did you go through the clearance by our IEBC? And were there issues that arose about your dual citizenship?
Kenya has had relations with Seoul for the past 54 years. And we've had various diplomats representing Kenya in this particular session. Who among the three who have gone to serve ahead of you do you admire most? What would you learn from them, and what do you expect to do better than them to put Kenya in a better position? Number two, we have what we call the principle of separation of powers. How does diplomatic relations affect this principle?
Thank you. Mwende, you may respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, as my national identification card will illustrate.
We got the ID as requested by Mheshimiwa Mwadi. And you were born 1971, 48 years ago. But you took the Kenya national ID 2017, just the other day. So maybe you respond and you explain. That's why you wanted the ID.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Honorable Tuwe, thank you for the questions. I welcome the question on dual citizenship because I think it's a very healthy discussion that this nation, as a progressive nation, needs to have. And I think that the issue of dual citizenship needs to be interrogated, particularly as we become more globalized and as we have a vibrant diaspora abroad. Your question started off with the issue of loyalty. And the best way I can answer you, Honorable Tuwe, is to look at my life. to look at my commitment to this country from my adulthood. Everything has been Kenya bound. But more particularly, I think the question is relevant vis-a-vis the position I have been nominated for. And I think with your permission, Mr. Chair, I will take you back to the Constitution so that we get some clarity on this issue. In Chapter 6, Article 78 of our Constitution, we deal with issues pertaining to leadership and citizenship. And in it, it provides that a citizen, under leadership, a person is not eligible for election or appointment to a state office unless the person is a Kenyan citizen. A state officer or a member of the defense forces may not hold dual citizenship. If you look at the state's and the Constitution's definition of what is a state officer, an ambassador does not fall under this category, which means that the provision would not apply for my appointments. It is very clearly stated in the Constitution that you members uphold. Beyond that, though, for any avoidance of doubt, there's a very clear distinction in a different article, which is Article 234, Section 3, which makes a distinction of its own. Clauses 1 and 2 say that this does not apply to state offices, and B, it does not apply to an office of the High Commission, ambassador, or any other diplomatic or consular representatives of this country. You followed up with a question on being a spy. And I think it is fair to say that every envoy is first a national, is a defender, even just if you look at our foreign affairs policy. It is about protecting this nation. So your first mandate, and your only mandate, as a matter of fact, is to serve the country. I think that every person will look at any ambassador and realize that they are the first port of call when their president calls on them for local intelligence on what is going on in their nation. So would I, by all measures, be Kenya and His Excellency's spy, reporting back on the progress that our nation is making in Korea? I think spy is a strong word, but it goes in hand with a mandate to protect and to preserve and to promote the country. Honorable Mwadi asked me about vying for a political party. I did indeed, in 2017, vie under the Party of Jubilee for the Member of Parliament position in Mwingi West constituency. It is correct that I was sufficiently vetted, and I want to drag you back to the Constitution, Chapter 6, verses Article 8, in Clause 3b, which says that any person who has been made a member of another country by operation of that country's law without the ability to opt out. I went through every single vetting process and engaged every single one of our institutions. You will see that all my official documents are extremely authentic. In fact, it has been, to follow up on your question, Mr. Chair, if you allow me to lump it in with this one, as to why my ID is from 2017. It was a long, arduous process for me to get a national ID. As you are aware, dual citizenship was only permitted when our new constitution was effected in 2010. So prior to that, I was not, even though I was raised in Kenya since I was 16 months old. 16 months old in Kitui. So as much as I was Kenyan and am, I didn't have the ability until after the Constitution. I started off with the effort of trying to secure a passport. It took me about 2 to 3 years doing various things, using the online version, trying to get it through our local ministry here, through immigration. It took me about 3 years to get a passport. Once I received my passport, then I had to get a different ID. To get a different ID, Mr. Chair, I had to apply for a new birth certificate, which was the birth certificate of a Kenyan born abroad. Once I secured that, and that was several months, then I now had to apply for a new identification card. So I don't know what else possibly, Mr. Chair and Honorable Mwadi, demonstrates my commitment. While others are surrendering their Kenyan citizenship, I have fought to regain and to claim and to own mine. And one thing is very true. You can choose where to belong, but you cannot choose where to be born. And I was born in the U.S., but I belong to Kenya. In the opting out clause, you know, there are things that you can opt out of. If I was married to an American and hence my dual citizenship, I have the option of divorce. If I had won a green card, I have the option of surrendering it. If I had been awarded citizenship because I had applied for it, I have the option of saying, thank you, you've given me a great opportunity to be a member of your country, but I revoke it, I want to renounce it to become a Kenyan again. Mr. Chair, I cannot opt out of where I was born. People do not choose where they are born. Honorable Gogo, you asked about the relationship that we have had with Seoul. It is indeed Korea, South Korea. It is indeed true that our bilateral relations started in 1964 and that we have a good, strong, and cordial relationship with South Korea. That said, I think that our embassy, which opened in 2007, is a relatively new station. And you noted that up to point, we have only had 3 ambassadors in that position. I don't think I'm sufficiently qualified, with all due respect, to grade and rate them because I don't have enough background on them. I wasn't part of their vetting or performance assessment.
Chair, just to clarify, I actually asked, what do you admire? What can you learn about the 3 said envoys who have been there ahead of you? What would you want to probably do better? That was my question.
Thank you, Honorable Gogo. Mr. Chair, there's a lot to learn from each one. Of course, there was the first one that we had, Ngovi Kitavi, who opened the office. I can only imagine the challenges he had going to a foreign nation, probably not speaking the language, and yet trying to penetrate new space for Kenya. I find myself advantaged over my 3 predecessors in the sense that I'm bringing in a new tone. I'm bringing in a new image of Kenya. I'm bringing in a wealth of experience under my belt, having worked with this government in non-official diplomatic roles for quite a while through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I am going to learn the language of Korea. I think it is a very exciting station. The potential that is unrealized between the 2 countries is tremendous. We have a lot of goodwill from Korea. As you're aware, we've had Prime Minister, we've had a President visit us, and the amount of collaboration, whether from an IT point or through COICA here, is continuously growing. We definitely have challenges, and I'm sure somebody else will ask us the challenges, but I want, if affirmed, if confirmed, I want to hit the ground running and bridge those gaps. But as it relates to my last predecessor, Ambassador Mohammed, it will be for me to ask him what the current situation is. It's very difficult to audit a station if you have not spoken to the caretakers. Thank you.
Thank you. I heard you quoting Article 78, Article 260 of the Constitution. I hope you have also acquainted yourself to Leadership and Integrity Act, specifically Clause 31 and Clause 52.
Honorable Chair, one question was not answered on separation of powers and diplomacy.
Again, Mwende, without underestimating your capabilities and, of course, the nature of where you were born, this thing we must, in a way, without necessarily you answering or maybe the chairman will give direction, I must equally read for you the U.S. Constitution because you're now a dual citizen. And the U.S. Constitution says, although the U.S. permits dual citizenship, it does not recognize foreign citizenship. Now, what confronts this committee is an extremely difficult situation in matters constitution because you are now bound by 2 separate interpretation of various constitutions of two countries. And probably it will be prudent for the chairman to rule if, as a matter of, even though the constitution does not expressly say that you cannot be posted as an ambassador, in the interest and the spirit of patriotism, will it be fair for other Kenyans who still have a single identity and want to hold it so, and are equally qualified to occupy the position?
Thank you. Just before you rest, just take it easy, relax, because even you are provided with water to take in case. So, Mheshimiwa Nakara.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I can't argue on the knowledge and the wisdom of the President to appoint up this position, but Chairman, I want us to delve so much on the activities and duties and responsibilities that this person is going to do in South Korea. Honorable Chairman, economic relations between us and South Korea is not in our favor. It's actually on the favor of South Korea. And I want to ask the appointees that bilateral trade is not good for us. What can you do as our ambassador in South Korea to make sure that this bilateral trade is balanced between us and South Korea, so that we can also benefit from my experience, from our outgoing or our global knowledge?
I think whenever we quote our constitution or any other document, we should look at the spirit of that document. So I'm looking at the spirit of the constitution. What was it trying to achieve? And it was trying to say that certain functions or whatever can only be held by citizens of this country. Now, I want to ask the nominee a very stark question. After all, life is about choices. If you are faced with a stark choice between getting this job and remaining a Kenyan citizen, or renouncing your U.S. citizenship, what would you do?
Elections were done in August 2017. But you acquired Kenyan ID 14th November 2017. So when this is date of issue, 14th November 2017. So were you a citizen when you are cleared by IBC? Or maybe they didn't know? Just that.
Chairman, point of information, Chairman. Thank you. Chairman, my senator, as dual citizenship, is an American, is a Kenyan. Born at Turkana, Queen Turkana, and went to the U.S. When he came back to Kenya, he contested as senator. He was elected. And I think he must denounce one.
Sorry, for records, you said he failed, so he was not elected.
No, the senator was elected. I'm referring to our case.
In my view, Mr. Chairman, there really is no separation. When an ambassador or an envoy is deployed, an ambassador is actually a direct representative of His Excellency the President. So there is no separation whatsoever that can exist between power and diplomacy. Indeed, it's a political process, and politics, as Clausewitz says, is another means of war. So as a diplomat, as a representative of the President, my duty will be to safeguard the interests of Kenyan citizens in Korea, to safeguard the integrity of the embassy itself, and more importantly, to pursue the interests of our nation in that country. Honorable Koech, you asked about my qualification to hold office and which nation I will be beholden to. Again, I welcome this conversation, Mr. Chair, because it is a very healthy one, and it is going to set a precedent for how this committee and the future committees handle situations such as mine. I would like to draw you back to the chapter that I keep on referring us to, particularly Section 3B on opting out. It is the options that allow you to opt out do not include birth. So I cannot backtrack and tell my parents, please conceive me and deliver me elsewhere. I understand fully the considerations and the concerns that revolve around having an officer who holds dual nationality serving. However, under our very same constitution, as you're well aware, an ambassador is not a state officer. But it ties back to, I think, the more important question you asked about my clearance. And I think I would ask for a sense of honesty in the discussion, because, Mr. Chair, if I was cleared with authentic documents, and the only reason why my ID is a 2017 was because A, it was a reissue, and B, it was a correction. Because my original identification, which I had held for, a long time, said Mwingi as my home. However, under the new constitution, now that there were provisions for the dual citizenship, it was changed. And then I lost my identification, so I got a new one. If the authorities, if you need me to do a follow-up to prove the authenticity of all of my documents, like I said, I even had to wait for a period of applying for a birth certificate of a citizen born abroad. All the documentation in my party that I vied on, which is the Jubilee Party, and at the IBC, all are very, very, very clear. And I don't know what more honesty there is when I have an ID that says I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So the documents are clear. And the question is, in terms of thresholds, Mr. Chair, if I can be cleared, because, again, under our Constitution, I cannot opt out of being an American, so that will always be a fact. But I have the ability and the privilege and the ownership of Kenyan citizenship under our Constitution. That is why I was able to vie as a member of Parliament. So it does not apply if, indeed, you were married or got a green card or applied and were granted citizenship elsewhere. And that said, we are aware that we perhaps do have members of Parliament or in other positions in our administration holding sensitive dockets that actually fall within that category. So I am of the I cannot opt out, but if I was going to be entrusted by the people of Mwingi West and this government and all its relevant authorities, not just to be an envoy where I'm going to be implementing policies, but to be an actual legislator, which I think the threshold is significantly higher. I mean, if I'm appointed and you come to Korea, it will be me hosting you, not the other way around. So your position and the position I had vied for, Member of Parliament, is significantly more sensitive. And so we ask ourselves, if by law, by the Constitution that we uphold, I am legally authorized to be an envoy, because A, I am not a state officer, or B, I can't opt out, how does it apply to me if I would have been a member of this National Assembly? These are things that we need to interrogate. And my appeal to you, Mr. Chairman, as now a member of the diaspora, is we need to be a little more open-minded and a little more progressive when it comes to matters of dual citizenship. Because we have a very, very vibrant Kenyan diaspora that remits a significant amount of money. I think the number for 2018 was about 2.8 billion Kenyan shillings. These are our sons, these are our daughters. We have Kenyans who are in NASA, we have engineers, and we have students. And they go abroad and they start their families. Are we really saying effectively, through a situation like this, as much as we complain about brain drain, that we are going to prohibit those nationals from coming back and building this country? So I think it's worth interrogating. It's a very meaningful discussion, and it is one that calls for us to refer back to the Constitution as a case that sets precedents, to say that under the rules that currently apply, if our country through a referendum wishes to make amendments to these sections, that is what a democracy is all about. But under the current Constitution as we have it, I am entitled and I feel obligated to build this country because my allegiance is to this country. I own property, I own homes, I have grown up here, my children come here on an annual basis. I vied because I believe in leadership. I have never vied for a political position in the U.S. In fact, I have hardly voted, I'm embarrassed to say, in the U.S. So I'm Kenyan through and through, and that will not change.
Point of order, Chairman. The former British Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, was born in America. Born in America. And for him to go and vie in UK, he had to denounce the American citizenship. So it's not a question of not having the ability to denounce.
You obtain the national identity cards after elections. Okay? Date of issue is here, 14th November 2017. And elections were in August 2017. And then again, nobody is saying dual citizenship is bad. No. At all. But you see, it also comes with a cost. You know, there will be some positions you will not be able to occupy if you are a dual, you have dual citizenship. Like for instance, I want to clear the air that if you keep saying ambassadors are not state officers, what they are public officers. And that's why I'm referring you to Leadership and Integrity Act, specifically Section 52. It says public officers at some instances like this, they are also referred to as state officers. So that's one. And number two, you did not respond to what Mheshimiwa Koech asked, that U.S. Constitution does not recognize other citizenship. And then we pick, I can see Mheshimiwa Raso, and then Mheshimiwa Lilian, and Krima. Krima will be number two.
Thank you, Honorable Kivai, for bringing up Boris Johnson. It is true that Boris Johnson renounced his citizenship. But I think what is of importance to note is that he was actually a member of parliament in Britain for a very long time before he renounced his citizenship. In fact, Mr. Chairman, he renounced it in 2016 only because he was interested in pursuing the Prime Minister's position. Prior to that, he was serving as a British MP as a dual citizen. Okay? So to answer the question of me possibly revoking my citizenship, I think it is something I would welcome if I was vying for a position that legally demanded it. For instance, it is impossible to be a president of the Republic of Kenya if you hold dual nationality. So if that was the position that I was pursuing or I was being nominated for, then I would have no reluctance whatsoever. But under the threshold of the Constitution that all of us respect and voted in, then I am not required, there's no requirement for me at this point to consider revocation.
I'm being informed that the point Mheshimiwa Kivai was raising is not even the issue of denouncing, but you kept saying it is impossible to opt out. So he's telling you it is possible to opt out, and even you have clearly said if you are running for the position of president of this country, you opt. So it is possible.
Mwende, congratulations for your nomination. I really want to change gear because we have talked about dual nationality. Reading your resume, I can see they say June 2009, then January 2019. What I'm really interested with is you were born in 1971. So I believe your resume should be able to account for the rest of the years of your life. Mr. Chairman, the second question I want to pose is maybe I will still use the resume, which says, I'm well-seasoned business professional with knowledge in corporate financing and marketing. I'm also an expert at crafting communication strategies for government, one who possesses an extensive international network. My question on this is you have not worked in government, do not have any experience in government. You have been appointed an ambassador. The question is, are you able to work the bureaucracy? Because the government is a very bureaucratic institution. Finally, Chairman, also from your resume, I think you have worked in the corporate world. And among some of the things is in the tech industries and also in what I would call the first world industries. If you compare Korea and Kenya, Korea is the fourth largest economy in Asia, and also in the tech sense, I think it's one of the best in the world. When we compare the gap in terms of our trading, I think you can compare it to none. What are you likely to do if you are successfully appointed by this committee and the House? Thank you, Chairman.
The spirit of the Constitution as it was enshrined by then was to make sure that when one is serving in a position which may be compromising, if one is a state officer, he shouldn't denounce one or shouldn't be a pure Kenyan citizen. Now, looking at the conduct, from the time as you told us that you have been born and you have been living here, you have acquired all your education here, even you have joined as an MP, there is something else which I find that it betrays you a little bit. If you go to this questionnaire, number 18, you ask which places you specialize in or the charitable organizations which you have been assisting. You go ahead and say that you are a member of a Rotary Club somewhere in New York. And you know, to be a member of a Rotary Club means that that's a place where you specialize in. And that's the group which you join in to be, you know, the roles of a Rotary Club. Now, is your mind not so much in America than is it in Kenya? That's one. Then, if you go ahead, you find that once upon a time, in the year 2007, you happen to be representing a party called PNU in USC, not in Kenya, which means you are more versed with USA affairs than Kenya. So this shows that even after you are acquiring education in Kenya, you really respected your American citizenship and you went back to your country. And as we talk, you have told us very clearly that your children come here for holidays. Now once they are living in their country, but they come here to visit. Now, sincerely, is this not a conflict of interest when it comes to the interests of the two countries?
And the title is Application of Chapter 6 of the Constitution, and this act to public officers generally, because ambassadors are public officers, not state officers. But it says, pursuant to Article 80C of the Constitution, the provision of Chapter 6 of the Constitution and Part 2 of this Act, except Section 18, shall apply to all public officers as if they are state officers. So there is a point where they are state officers, they are public officers, but there is also a point where public officers are referred to as state officers. Section 31, this one doesn't need even a reply. Section 31, the title is Citizenship. Subsection 2, it says, a person who holds dual citizenship shall upon election or appointment to a state office not take office before officially renouncing their other citizenship in accordance with the provisions of the Kenya Citizenship and Immigration Act of 2011. So those are, but that one don't need even, I just wanted you to, because I told you, this is the first case of this kind. So we really want to set a good precedent. So we want to explore all possible ways to get the right way forward.
I think the issue of dual citizenship, the issue that keeps coming up, and you seem to not really answer it, is your loyalty. Where will your loyalty lie? South Korea is a country of interest, especially to America. So when those interests, American interests and the Kenyan interests, clash, would you not be in an awkward situation on which of your country to serve, because you're a citizen of both countries? But my question is on tourism. Tourism in South Korea is doing well. How do you plan to transfer the same to Kenya? What strategies do you plan to put in place? Unemployment in South Korea is also quite low. It stands at between 9 to 10%. And you know unemployment here in Kenya is quite high. How do you plan to share best practices if, of course, approved for this position? How do you plan to share what South Korea has done to deal with their unemployment for us to also use the same strategies? Thank you.
From the interview with Boris Johnson with one of the media houses in the UK, his main reason for renouncing U.S. citizenship was issue of taxation, because the U.S. have a word or policy of taxing people. I'm curious, as it stands today, are there taxes you are paying to the U.S.? And indeed, if you qualify for this job, will you be paying taxes from your salary to the U.S., to our government and also to the U.S.?
If you look, for instance, at the year 2017, we exported about 2.3 billion shillings worth of goods against over 17 billion. Now, the reason behind that is multifaceted. The first is the nature of the goods being imported and exported. On Korea's side, they're exporting to us value-added goods. They're importing to us steel products, electronic goods, vapor-generating boilers, among many other things. In contrast, we are exporting mainly raw materials, copper waste and scrap materials, cut flowers, and items like that. So naturally, if you just look at, say, a Samsung phone, a regular Samsung smartphone, how many bags of coffee is it going to take against that, to bridge that difference? So that is one of the reasons why there's that deficit. The other is also because the nature of our goods, we're not value-adding. And this is something that I would implore the relevant agencies to look at. I know it has been a discussion in this government and previous governments, because unless we value add, we will not get the top shilling or top dollar for our goods. Our farmers will continue to suffer, and there's no reason why we should export tomatoes to import them back as tomato paste, or export coffee when our farmers are very capable of roasting, and we then import back instant coffee. So the issue of value addition is another thing that we need to look into, and I'll address Mr. Memusi, if you will allow me, in linkage with this one. The last thing, and this is a challenge that is being addressed by by the current ambassador, Ambassador Gado, and the Koreans and the Kenyan government, which is the issue of the quality of our produce. In fact, the committee may wish to know that at the present, we in fact have a ban on most of our produce. We cannot export. We have minimal quantities of green beans and things like that, simply because of sanitation and phytosanitation issues. We have not been able to export produce that is pest-free, and every nation is concerned about agricultural goods that may come and infringe on their agricultural ecosystem. So I'm happy to report that there are ongoing negotiations. As we speak, there's some produce that is on the verge of being allowed into Korea, such as unripe bananas and broccoli. But as it relates to the others, we still have some work to do. And KEFIS, in conjunction with its counterparts in Korea, are working on finding methodologies that will enable us to produce and then package in a sanitary manner the agricultural produce that we'll send. So that's another thing. And then, of course, we're a tea-producing country, Mr. Chair. And the deficit is also impacted by the high taxes that Korea has imposed on our tea. This is something that I know the current administration is probably agitating about. I'm sure our current ambassador has engaged in discussions with the Korean government about this. And it's certainly something that I, if honored with this appointment, will pursue very, very strongly, because Kenyan tea is worldwide known and appreciated, including in markets such as China. And it would be a shame, particularly given the deficit and the imbalance, if the Koreans didn't give us at least some leeway or some incentives on most of our agricultural produce. So to answer, if I will, I believe it was Mr. Honorable Memusi's question about relating to tourism and high unemployment. I'd like to tie it into the value addition. You know, value addition needs investors. And right now, most of our foreign investors are focused more on infrastructure, you know, the construction of our roads and our ports and things like that. But we have lots of youth that remain unemployed that could benefit tremendously from the one thing other than technology that South Korea has that is marked, which is its human capital. As it is, we, I believe, have about 1,000 Kenyan students who have been sponsored in Korea. We have an increasing Korean presence here. But there's an interest and a discussion that's ongoing about finding employment through Korea for our youth here. And that would be through the special economic zones. My understanding is there's land or discussions of putting such zones in Athi River, tapping the investors in Korea, having them come to set up shop here where they can benefit the farmers who need their produce value added, and in the process offering employment to our youth who so desperately need it. As it relates to tourism, the tourism issue is a little tricky, Honorable Memusi, because Koreans have a very short vacation time. My understanding is their vacations, because they're so, you know, such diligent workers. Unlike Europeans who have a minimum of 6 weeks, unlike Americans who have 2 weeks, they generally have 1 week. My belief is if we market ourselves, package things that are specific to the Korean tourists, and then perhaps work on the trade issue, raise the trade, then we might be able to renegotiate the entry of Korean Air, which, as you know, barely touched ground in Kenya. So if right now the Koreans have to go to other destinations to reach Kenya, then their 1 week of vacation is already exhausted. They will have time to maybe see 1 or 2 lions, but they will not have time to visit our mountains and our beaches.
Thank you, Chairman, for the opportunity. Madam Mwende Mwinzi, congratulations for your nomination. And if you pass the interview and if you are approved by the House, I'm sure you will be able to make a wonderful ambassador. But out of curiosity, if you look at the questionnaire we gave you, question number 23, sources of income, you've indicated none. And you just confirmed that you are meant to pay the taxes to the U.S. Would it be that you are afraid if you indicate your source of income, therefore it follows that you have not paid the taxes to the USA as you should? And therefore it goes on to 25, where you have stated that your net worth is 150 million. It's a contradiction, because you can't have nil income and yet you have worth of 150 million. That's question number one. Number two, we are aware of one president of our country who went to the U.S. recently, and the U.S. laws does not recognize anybody who has dual citizenship as a president. He was not given a state reception because of that dual citizenship. In the event that you are given a chance to represent Kenya as an ambassador and you are transferred to the USA, they will never recognize you as an ambassador. What then happens to Kenyans? Because they recognize you as their citizen.
Can you respond? Well, those two, then we close.
Yes. Honorable Macau, thank you for the question. It is indeed true that I have an American accent. I think you can trace it back to 2 simple factors. One, the fact that my mother is an American citizen. She is a woman from Wisconsin. So even when I was growing up in Kitui, I had an influence of an American accent. But I also wish to point out to the honorable member that my Kamba accent is equally as authentic as it is. And
it's authentic as his.
As authentic as his, indeed. Honorable Vice Chair, let me respond to your question about, you started off with the sources of income. At present, it is true. At present, you heard me refer to a master's program in global security. I have taken time off. I'm about to conclude this program, and so that is why I wanted to say that at the moment I have not been pursuing any business opportunities. With that said, yes, my net worth is accurate. Number one, I have property here that can be authenticated. I'm happy to provide you a list. And let me also remind you that I'm not single. I'm a family woman who happens to be married to an individual who is a very hardworking individual and an excellent provider. So there's no contradiction between the two. With regards to your last question, yes, I'm aware of that situation. However, that is an actual sitting president. And I think that there's a distinction between a representative of a president and an actual president. So yes, when he went, he was not recognized by the U.S. administration because he was considered a U.S. citizen. However, as an envoy, I would be considered quite aptly and readily the envoy because I'm a representative, not the actual president. I represent the presidency. Thank you.
Just as a point of curiosity, because I'm aware of the president, he was not recognized as president when he went to the U.S. because he has dual citizenship. One happened to be the U.S. citizenship. And he was told when he went to the U.S., we cannot have two presidents in the U.S. at the same time. So he was told, you are a citizen. Even you, if you go to the U.S. an ambassador, no country can have two ambassadors at the same time because we will have an ambassador already in the U.S. But anyway, I want to bring to a close. I want to give you one or two. Sorry, we have really been very tough on this because, as we said, this is the first case of its kind. So it will actually give the precedent for others. So give you 2 minutes or a minute.
I'd like to thank you for the inordinate amount of time you've given me. I thank you for all the questions. I think the questions were very important questions, and it's good that you understand who the nominees are, what their character traits are, in order to make a good recommendation. I'm hoping that through this process you've gotten a better understanding of who I am, of what I represent, and that I have earned your trust and your recommendation for confirmation. I'm very excited about this nomination. As I said, I consider it an honor, not just as a female, not just as a member of the diaspora, but as an individual who has been extremely devoted to this country my entire adult life. I did not just start yesterday. If I'm awarded this nomination, this confirmation, my work is going to be informed very simply by Kenya's foreign policy, which, as you know, has 4 primary pillars. And I think my first goal in following, on peace diplomacy, economic diplomacy, the diaspora diplomacy, the environmental diplomacy, and the cultural, will be to start off where we already are. There's no point in reinventing the wheel. The big 4, Mr. Chair, cannot be realized unless we have a stronger economy. And my goal, therefore, will be to leverage the efforts that have already been made. And because I'm aware of the high unemployment rate among the youth and the anguish of farmers, I will do what I explained to Honorable Mamusi, which is do everything I can to fast-track this process that is of the ban on our agricultural produce. KEFIS and HCDA are working with their counterparts. I'm hoping that the farmers will be educated and provided maybe different seeds to raise the level of produce. And also, follow up on discussions such as the about to be lifted, market for avocados. I will work on the reduction of taxes on our tea, and further, I had as a point exploring mechanisms that focus on tourism. And then just as a last point, I think that it's important to recognize that given all that the Koreans have given to Kenya, they're hoping to see some reciprocity in terms of us sending a high-level delegation, perhaps of the level of His Excellency the President. I think it would further deepen and strengthen this relationship and perhaps make open up more opportunities than we have at present. So thank you very much again for your time. God bless Kenya.
Thank you so much.